Well, good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to our first virtual conference. This is actually Grieving with Hope's third annual conference, but this is the first time that we have been joining. And so we just want to welcome you on behalf of Janelle and I want to welcome you again to our first annual Grieving with Hope virtual conference. Our first presentation, which is by Mrs. Shea Marriott, who is a licensed clinical social worker with Delaware Mental Health and Wellness. So just to give us a little background on Shea, she does have a master's in clinical social work and a bachelor's in psychology. She's a licensed therapist who specializes in working with adults, children, and families by providing evidence-based treatment in functional family therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. She also specializes in women issues and has a great track record in working with men and depression. Ms. Marriott is also the Director of Marketing and Business Relations at the Center for Child Development and Delaware Center for Counseling and Wellness. With her eclectic style, her focus is to empower women and men to make meaningful changes in their lives through setting achievable goals while maintaining good emotional and mental health and balance. She has years of experience working with trauma, anxiety, self-esteem, depression, body image, and rebuilding self. Shea is the founder and CEO of Rebirth, Starting Over After a Life Crisis, and she is also the host of Rebirth Podcast. She is committed to helping others begin the process of healing and rebuilding. She is committed to the psychoeducation, empowerment, and community outreach by offering her services for individual family, parenting groups, teen groups, and mentoring. I actually know Shea very personally. She was actually my counselor when I was dealing with the grief of losing my sister and losing my father. She was definitely a vital part of my healing, a part of my journey. She was amazing to work with as a counselor. She was very understanding. She had a lot of good tips, and she helped me understand what I was feeling and let me know that what I was feeling was absolutely normal. And, she was one of the first people that explained to me that grief is a journey. It's a lifelong journey, but it's a journey that you definitely can handle. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Miss Marriott. Miss Marriott.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Anitra and Janelle, for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I had the honor to be there last year, and I'm just so excited to be able to present this morning, so thank you. So we're going to start off talking about the stages of grief and loss. Okay, so the stages of grief and loss came about by Dr. Elizabeth Ross. She was actually a Swiss-born American psychiatrist. She was an author of many books. However, her most famous book was about death and dying. Dr. Ross pretty much revolutionized the care of terminally ill, and she helped patients, she helped people get through the loss, the pain control, and death itself. Now, although she created these stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief, and most of us apply them to losing someone, these stages can also be applied to loss of a relationship. So if you went through a divorce, or if you had any type of loss that pretty much put you in a place where you couldn't function like you normally function, these stages can also be applied to that as well. Okay. So Elizabeth, her theory of the stages, the 5 stages of grief, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. The 5 stages of grief does not necessarily have to go in the order. It can move all around. So one moment you might be in a state of denial, the next moment you might be in a stage of bargaining, and then you may go back to that stage of denial. So we often move between these stages before achieving a peaceful acceptance of our death. Many of us are not afforded the luxury of time of being able to, achieve this final stage of grief without going through these stages. Dr. Ross was born in 1926, and she herself transitioned in 2004 after suffering multiple strokes. And we're going to look at the stages of grief. Okay, so denial. Denial is also known as shock and denial. It's our way of being able to slow down, take in just what happened, and it's pacing of taking care of our feelings. Sometimes it may look like a state of shock or incongruent affect to the circumstances. So our feelings are not matching what just happened. A perfect example would be if you attend a funeral and you notice the loved one of the person that transitioned may not be crying or showing any emotions at all. And we might look at that as like, okay, well, what's going on? Why isn't he or she crying? But that person possibly could be in the stage of denial. We have anger. So anger is also known as anger and guilt. Anger can be very obvious, or it can be internal. It can be passive aggressive as well. One could be angry with doctors. One could be angry with God. They can be angry with the person that is transitioning. And they also can be angry with themselves. In some cases, you have family members. If you think about it, you have family members when you have someone that has transitioned, they tend to kind of go at each other. They start to fight. They start to argue. And they're angry. And a lot of times it shows up because we're in different stages during our grief. So you may be in a stage of anger where one other family member may be at a stage of denial. And of course, it's very hard to communicate your feelings during that time. So most of the time, anger, we look at it as a bad emotion, but anger is really not a bad emotion. It's something that actually protects us. And in this case, it helps us move forward to be able to process the other stages that we need to go through in grief. When we're angry and we're lashing out, it's really our way of trying to rationalize what is happening, what is taking place in order for us to feel better. So the next, bargaining. Now, many times you will see bargaining during the transition of the loss, before the actual loss has actually happened. So a perfect example would be someone that is terminally ill. A terminally ill person who is transitioning may go through a bargaining stage where they're saying, God, please, if you just give me more time, I promise I will use my time wisely. Or a loved one who is experiencing a loved one that is transitioning may say, God, just take me and leave my loved one here. Or I promise I will do better if you would just allow them to live. So this is known as the bargaining stage. Now, like I said in the beginning, you don't necessarily, not everyone will go through these exact 5 stages, but in her research, it has shown that most people do. So the next stage is important, and this is the stage of depression. This stage it's a stage of sadness, but it's a sadness that is important to our healing process. It allows us to move through feelings and release them. It's important to get help and support when you're going through this stage, especially if you, prior to your loss, if you have already been diagnosed with some type of clinical depression, mood disorder, anything that will alter your emotions. Some people move through depression okay. Some people get stuck there. And when you're stuck and you've been there for a while, it's very, very important that you seek help. Rather it's a friend, family member, grief counseling, a therapist. It's very important that during this stage, you are able to seek help. And finally, the last stage would be the stage of acceptance. So this is the final stage, and this is the stage that, we all want to be at some point. So being in a place of alignment with the reality of this new chapter and what life looks like after the loss or the major change. That is the stage of acceptance. We have to understand that loss is a part of life. We are going to experience it at some point of our life. And to be able to understand these stages and what's to come helps us move through the grieving process. So what you should know about what we just went over. There is no set timetable for your grief. It's just not. You're going to feel better in weeks to come, but then you may have setbacks. But the whole process can take anywhere from 6 months to 4 years. But usually when you lose someone, you are grieving that loss. A holiday may come up and you're going to think about that person. So the grief is always going to be there, but you learn to live alongside of that loss. It will get easier. It will be easier to get up in the morning, and eventually you'll start to have more energy. It will get better, but it's going to take time. Ask for help when you need it. It's so important during this time that support from family, friends, spiritual advisors, grief support, or some type of therapy. And most importantly, be patient with yourself and show yourself compassion. Understand that you are going through something that is so life-changing, and your life will never be the same after that transition of a loved one. It will never be the same. So be patient, stay encouraged, and show yourself compassion, because you will be able to rebirth a new version of yourself. It might not be the same, but you will be able to rebirth a new version, new chapter of your life. So the resources that we have available: Delaware Center for Counseling and Wellness, which is located right here in the state of Delaware, which is where I'm from. We also have the Center for Child Development and also the National Suicide Prevention Line. I wanted to make sure that I put that up there, because during this time, sometimes people do have thoughts of suicide. And it's so important to be able to acknowledge that. And when you're feeling that way, make sure that you seek help. For out-of-state resources, we have the Clinician of Color Directory, which you can go onto this directory and you can find a therapist of color that looks exactly like you. I think it's very known in the Black community that we may not seek therapy like other ethnic groups would. So to be able to find a therapist that you can relate to is important in our process of being able to go to therapy. And last but not least, we have the Grief Resource Network, which you also can, seek help for. So I would like to thank you for your attention and time in this, and understand again that grieving is a process. It is a part of life, and time will heal. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. I will take any questions if you have any, and I wish you all an amazing holiday. And thank you again, Anitra and Janelle.
Thank you, Shea.
You're welcome.
So that was very helpful. It was concise. It was short, sweet, and to the point, because grief is complicated. And I think that the stages were great. I love the visuals and just, clarifying that this is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
We are opening up the chat for questions. Janelle and I are going to read anything that pops up. Again, because of the amount of people, we're trying to make this orderly. So does anybody have a question?
Shea?
Yes.
So right now with COVID-19 and a lot of families dealing with a mass amount of grief at this time, I've experienced where I've had a lot of people give me a call because funerals are being canceled, or maybe only 10 members can go to the funeral, or they're even having memorials now by Zoom, what suggestions would you give to someone who would usually have the comfort of hugs and things like that at a funeral? How do you suggest that somebody dealing with that situation deal with being comforted by themselves at home?
That's a great question, Janelle, and it's so relevant right now. It's definitely an adjustment, and when you're losing someone and you can't actually be there to say goodbye and give your last respects, is very, very difficult. I know a lot of my clients at this point are really tapping into just family supports, that being able to connect with each other any way that they can, rather it is having family Zooms, being able to tap into those memories that they have of their lost ones, reflecting on, the last time that they were together. I would suggest doing a lot of journaling during this time. If there is a higher power that you tap into, I suggest tapping into that as well, and practicing a lot of self-care during this time, because we are limited to how we grieve, how we usually grieve pre-COVID. Some families are doing memorials, in their own way. Rather it's releasing balloons in their own backyard, just finding different things to really celebrate the transitioning of life of their loved one. And it is a time to be very creative in doing this, but understanding it is not our normal of how we usually do things when people transition, but it still is something that we can do to participate, to express our emotions and feelings.
I'm going to take that, Shea. I'm going to say that as a counselor, what do you say to people who've been trying and they haven't found a good fit? Because I hear people say, I went to therapy once and it didn't work. Can you kind of speak to the process of finding a therapist and how you have to really be consistent?
Sure, absolutely. So it is very important that the therapist that you pick, and I'm saying that you pick because honestly, you need to interview your therapist. You need to be very comfortable, because it's important that the relationship is a trusting relationship. I mean, think about it. You're sitting in front of this person and you're going to be pretty much vulnerable and sharing a lot of information that you've probably never shared with people. And you're going to be tapping into some things that you may have not tapped into. So it's going to be important that the person that you choose as your therapist, you can relate to them, you feel comfortable with them, and it's going to take some time. I would say that make sure when you're seeking therapy that you look at it as an interview process in the beginning with your therapist. Make sure you are comfortable with he or she. And if you're not, keep looking, because there is people out there that, you will feel very comfortable with. And the more relatable you can be, or the more relatable the therapist is with you, I think your journey is going to be well worth it, and you will feel comfortable. You will want to go to therapy. You don't want to miss your sessions. You will look forward to being in that space, because it's a way that you can purge everything that's going on with you in a safe space. So you have those different directories. You have, I mentioned Clinician of Color, which is a directory that was started by Lisa Savage Phillips, who is an amazing person here in the state of Delaware, and the owner of Delaware Center for Counseling and Wellness and Center for Child Development. And that directory consists of all therapists of color across state.
Jay, I have the next question. Okay. I have someone on here that is a therapist, and she specializes in trauma and suicide prevention. And her son was murdered 1 month ago.
Wow.
And right now she's feeling very uneasy, and she says she's seeking and she's praying, but she's still feeling very sick. So let me ask you, how would you suggest somebody that is a therapist that's specializing in all these things, how do they deal with their grief at the same time counsel others on their grief?
Yeah.
What would your advice be?
Yeah, well, first of all, my condolences to your loss. I can't imagine what you may be going through in this time. The one thing that I think as therapists, we have to understand that we're human first. We are human first, and we have to practice that self-care. We have to take that time And in a situation like this, I would definitely say to seek out therapy yourself. I believe that every therapist should have their own therapist, because it is something we do process a lot on a daily basis. But now you're dealing with such a major loss, of your son. And this is the time to now pour into yourself, to everything that you give to your clients. Take a pause and pour into yourself and take time to make sure you're okay. So my suggestion for you would absolutely, get into therapy, work on your own stuff first. And it's okay, to take a pause. And we know how to connect our clients to other therapists, or have someone look over our patients while we take a break from this. So don't look at it as abandoning your patients, but look at it as being able to now focus on yourself so you can be better for your patients when you get back to therapy.
We had a couple questions about time. So one person said, how do you talk to people who try to get you back to normal sooner than you're ready? To them, you may appear to be healed, but in reality, you're not as good as they think you are.
Right.
And then there is another person who said, how long does it take to get over grief? Is there a time frame? And I think when you hit that in your presentation, people think that at a certain point you should be good. So can you respond to the time frames, and people thinking you should be farther?
Sure, absolutely. Like I stated earlier, there is no time. I mean, we can suggest, 6 months to 4 years, but honestly, that's not even realistic. You will never truly get over the loss of someone that has been in your life and has been very monumental in your life. So, but you will learn to live alongside of it. The pain will be there, but it won't be as intense. You understand? So it's not more so looking to, don't rush the process of grief. Don't rush trying to get through that feeling. I know it's uncomfortable, but it is a process. And that's why I said you have to be very patient with yourself and show yourself compassion. In time, it will get a little bit better. It will get a little easier. It won't hurt as much, but the pain of losing someone will always be there. What will be different is you will learn to live alongside of that loss. You will learn to live next to it and understand it. And if you're able to be patient with yourself during this process, you won't continue to revert back to those stages. In long term. Initially, you will. You may go through anger. You may go through denial. You may go through bargaining. But in time, you will stay in the acceptance stage, but also knowing that, okay, my loved one is not here. Yes, it hurts, but it's not as bad. I've learned, I've rebirthed something new. I have a new chapter in my life. I may not see things in a perspective that I used to when they were here, but I've been able to see things in a different way now. If that makes sense. So there really is no time frame to that. Just continue to do the work and continue to process what's happening and be patient. And you will notice the change. You'll notice the change as day by day, you may feel a little lighter. You may see that you were able to get up out of bed without struggling. The second answer to that question was, how do you deal with people that are pushing you through this process and expecting you to get over it or move past it? And, first understanding where it's coming from. A lot of people don't know what to say during grief and loss. They may say things like, how are you? That is a trigger to a lot of people because you want to say, how do you think I am? I've just lost someone major to me. How do you think I am? Right? So understand that person is not trying to do anything to upset you or hurt you. Sometimes people just don't know what to say during this time. They really don't. So they say the familiar, how are you? What can I do to help? Is there anything you need? And then when people are uncomfortable in seeing you hurt or seeing you sad, then they will start to push you. You need to get out of bed. Come on, let's go out. You should be getting over this by now. Mom will want you to move on with your life. Dad wouldn't want you sitting around feeling bad for yourself. And that can be very irritating as well. So I think in order to deal with people that do that, whether it's friends or family members, try to understand where they're coming from, the perspective that they're saying it from, and really think about like, okay, they don't know what to say to me right now. They really don't. And that's okay. So you may have to kind of, force space between some people. You may have to give yourself some time away from some people. You don't have to answer the phone all the time when people are calling and checking in. Let them know, hey, I'm okay, but I need my time right now. I need my space. Thank you for checking in on me, but I'm okay. And if I need something, I'll reach out to you. So it's setting boundaries, but also trying to be aware of the space that they're coming from as well, because you never know when you may have to reach out to them for help or support.